a 25% tariff on steel imports and a 10% tariff on aluminum imports. What is this about? Well, let's first be sure we all understand what a tariff is. It's just a special name for a tax. Basically, what a tariff does is say, if steel comes into the United States, whatever the price being charged, the importer is going to have to pay 25% more than that price, a tax on the steel that will go to the federal government, which is imposing the tax, and the likewise 10% for the aluminum. It's very good news for the producers of steel and aluminum here in the United States. See, it turns out they haven't been doing real well. They can't compete with imported steel, which is either of better quality or lower price, or both. And of course, when companies can't compete, one of the strategies they're free to pursue is to get the government to protect them by making it more expensive to buy the better quality or lower priced imports. It will force buyers here to turn to the American companies. And guess what? They can jack up their prices so long as they stay just a little bit below what the imported cost will be with this new tax, and that will allow them to raise prices to whom? To all the rest of us, to the companies that buy steel and aluminum in this country. Let me give you the two examples everybody cites. The automobile business in this country buys steel and aluminum. The can business, you know, canned soda, canned beer, all of that, canned vegetables, they use aluminum, etc., also in large quantities. These companies will be hurt because they're going to have to pay higher prices for the steel and aluminum they buy from the American companies that get protected by the tariff. So now let's look at what this means. The reality, as any trained economist knows, is, on the one hand, you may get some more jobs in the aluminum and steel business because their prices are going to go up. They're sitting pretty. But you will certainly lose jobs in the companies that buy a now higher priced steel and aluminum because their profits are going to go down and their conditions are going to deteriorate and they're going to lay off workers. No one knows in advance how this will play out. There's good reason to believe that the companies buying the higher priced steel and aluminum will be more negatively affected than the few companies in America that remain that produce steel and aluminum. Certainly, Mr. Trump and his advisors don't know how this plays out. And this is the most important thing for me to get across. They don't know, but they don't care. And let me explain why. Mr. Trump was elected president in good part because he promised Americans whose economic conditions, as we document every week, have been deteriorating pretty badly for most of the time since the crash of 2008. He promised them to turn the situation around. We have explained to you over and over again that he cannot do that, and he is not doing that. That continues. The tax cut he gave to corporations and the rich in late December are just part of that story. Well, the poor president, Trump, who can't deliver on the promise to improve the actual conditions of the American mass of people, therefore resorts to symbols, to theater, to pretend activities that make it look like he's doing what in fact he can't do. So he slaps tariffs, so he ejects immigrants. He does all this stuff to blame other people for the economic problems. Foreign immigrants, notice, foreign trade competitors, foreigners, always good to scapegoat foreigners when your system and your society are in trouble. So he's doing that, and this is just more symbolism. But Mr. Trump has a second reason for doing this. By putting tariffs on steel and aluminum, he makes those companies depend on him. They're going to have nice profits now if he imposes those tariffs because they can jack up their prices since the cost of importing those things has gone up. They will depend on those tariffs staying in place for their profits. So they're going to become big boosters of Mr. Trump. They have to. They will depend on him. At the same time, the automobile and aluminum can companies are going to be going to work to persuade Mr. Trump to reverse himself and not impose or not continue those tariffs. Headlines indicate that the leading economic advisor of Mr. Trump, Gary Cohn, is busily organizing auto companies and can companies to come to Washington. In other words, Mr. Trump positions himself in the middle, and so he can let the car and can companies on the one hand compete with the steel and aluminum companies on the other. Who's going to back him more? Who's going to contribute to his reelection campaign, which is already underway, more? He can have them bid for him because they will depend on his decision. He likes to be in that position. It will help him run for office. As usually is the case, countries that impose tariffs are doing it for domestic reasons. They don't care what the long-run international effects are because they won't be in their offices that many more years. That's true for Mr. Trump as well. And as a result, don't look at the details of the international effects because that's not what this is about. This is domestic politics of Mr. Trump in an economic system that is imposing hardship on the mass of people. That's the fundamental cause and function of these tariffs.